Hello, it is Ivy Nation Sports Talk. He's grooving. Vince. I'm Sean, hanging out here. Did you get any of that storm that blew through about 45 minutes or so ago?
A little bit of rain, but not bad. Not really bad at all because I was hoping to finish cutting my grass after the show.
Yeah.
And I don't think it really got wet enough for me to not do it. So that's a good thing.
Okay.
Because
I got most of mine
vacation,
done.
Like, it's long.
That's true. I got most of mine done this afternoon, and I didn't even realize it was supposed to rain. All of a sudden, it started getting dark outside, and it cooled off, and
I had no idea.
Yeah.
I guess it's going to rain tomorrow. I did see that, but I don't know. I don't know. Whatever. My trust in meteorologists at this point is pretty low. As I was watching the weather, like for vacation, for example, a couple days beforehand, it was supposed to rain like 4 days out of the 7 that we were there.
Right.
It rained like for 10 minutes, like the whole week, which obviously benefited us. It was great. But like when you're trying to plan certain things, you can't do it this day, you got to do it this day, and then you end up not doing it. It's like, man, these guys don't know what the heck they're talking about.
Hey, Joe in the chat says one of his guys got drafted today. Congratulations.
He messaged me about that. Got drafted by the Tigers, the old Tigers up north.
All right. Big congrats there. That's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, we've got, we're still not officially allowed to say when training camp starts. But
so stupid.
I don't understand.
This month.
Like, why is that a top secret? Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. I'll just tell you this. It's a little bit more than a couple weeks away.
Yeah.
It's going to be before the end of the month.
So. I was listening to a different podcast, somebody else on the beat. And so I'm going to repeat what they said. That show was on June 26th. Okay. That the day that they recorded the show was June 26th.
Like two and a half weeks ago, something like that.
Yep. Okay. And they said a month from today, training camp starts. So
that was probably the day the email went out. Let me I think I still got that email sitting in my inbox. See what day. Yeah, it was that day.
Okay.
And they were my bet is they recorded it like right after that email came out. And then you remember it took about an hour or so for the follow-up email. By the way, don't say anything about this.
So I'm just repeating what somebody else on the beat already put out there.
Yeah.
So it's not breaking news.
Training camp's coming. Training camp's coming.
Right. And we're gonna get a decent amount of look-see at training camp, which I'm kind of excited about. Too many, and I know that this is not an opinion shared by many, or all, I should say. Too many 5-period look-ins, not enough full practice look-ins, but who am I?
I agree with you. I completely agree with you.
I appreciate that.
That was the reason for the pregnant pause. I'm very frustrated by it.
Me too.
It's a lot of get up and go, and it's, in the Army we used to call it hurry up and wait. It's like, the dog and pony show. You show up, you wait at the door, they change the schedule on you.
Always.
Like how many times
never
does
starts
that
on
happen?
time.
Like
never starts
send
on
out
time.
The email. Show up at 4:45. So you show up at 4:45. Guess when you get in the door? 5:05, 5:10.
Correct.
Or its schedule moves, and then but the 5-period practice is just. I know that I guess some people can glean more than others from it, but I want to see guys actually line up, crack some heads, go head to head against each other. That's what I want to see.
You can glean stuff, but not the stuff that you want to glean. Let's put it that way. And you can extrapolate and all of that stuff. And like day one, we get the full practice, right? And it's not padded, right? So it's all going to be, so-and-so put on this weight, and so looks good, and so-and-so is moving well, and, all of these different, and so-and-so was on the side on the bicycle, and, all of these different things. And I don't know. It's frustrating. There's no doubt about it. And then we get 2 open practices. I'm not complaining. I want to preface, I'm not complaining. I'm telling. We get 2 open practices. The second one is going to be at a local high school that is going to be open to everybody. It's not even like a media thing. Like I don't know.
And it's a nighttime practice.
Yeah, 7 p.m.
We've still got to figure out, like, are we going to go do that and then come back and do a show that night? You know, like what's that going to look like?
Right.
So,
right.
Especially since I think that's the last time we get to see a full practice, isn't it?
I believe that is accurate. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Well, hey, hit the like button if you would. What we're going to do on today's show is we're going to rank the top 10 players heading into training camp. And what I thought we would do, we'll do this top 10 ranking. And
I didn't get that. Could you try?
No, thank you, Siri. It's really not for you to chime in right now. So we'll do the top 10 ranking now, and then we'll compare it maybe toward the end of camp, you know, going into the season.
Yeah, see if it's changed at all. I like that.
See if it's changed, that kind of thing. Tommy has given us his own top 10. He's got Sam Hartman at number 1, followed by Joe Alt, Benjamin Morrison, Blake Fisher, Audric Estime, Riley Mills, JD Bertrand, Cam Hart, Xavier Watts, Tobias Merriweather. Is that 10? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, that is 10. I guess he just went last name, so the list looks short. Right. It's a pretty good list. I'll be curious to see. I'll definitely say this. I've got a lot of those guys on my list. There are at least a couple that are not on my list, though. That's what's fun about doing these lists. I think that there's going to be some variation. We didn't compare lists, Vince and I, before we did this. So we'll just start at number 10. We'll work our way up. What factors are you using for ranking? Who we think is the best?
Whatever you want. Like, and I think that's the fun of it. That's the fun of it. It's just, who do you think is the best? It could be who's most important to Notre Dame's success, who is the best, just straight up athlete, who is the most, you know, all of the different things. It's whatever you want it to be. That's the way I took it. It's like, who do I think of first when I was like, I want that guy on my team? That's kind of how I did. It's like, who would I want on my team? Yeah, in that order.
I mean, that's a pretty good way to do it. And what I did, I think you did this pretty similarly. What I did was, okay, because I was like, okay, do I try to do this, like fill in my list as I go with the ranking? But instead, what I did, I just sat down and I started, like, off the top of my head writing down a bunch of names. And I went out to 15 names overall. The list is only 10. And that means I had to eliminate some. And, you know, obviously kept some on. Then it's a matter of, you know, where do I rank them and all that kind of stuff. And look, these lists are subjective. So again, like, not everyone's lists are going to look the same. And already just what we've seen so far, you know, like who's on some people's lists are not on my list specifically.
That's right.
So
I am very curious to see what your list looks like.
I am too. And I'll tell you, and we'll do kind of our honorable mention. And I think it's probably going to be pretty obvious once we get to the honorable mention, because I had a hard time. I had a really hard time, like, especially with those last couple spots, sort of figuring out who's going to get squeezed out of my list. Right. Because, like, again, when I went out to 15, it's like, man, those are all, like, the top half was really easy, you know, like who needed to be there regardless of what spot they're in. But
correct.
All right,
I'll
let you start with your number 10, and we'll work from there.
I have a feeling my number 10 is not on your list. That's what I will say. Okay. My number 10 is Zeke Carrell.
Okay.
Because and here's my reason why. I felt like he needed to be in the top 10 because we actually, Brian and I did a positional breakdown today, and we did the offensive line. So the offensive line is fresh in the old noggin today because we just spent 3 hours talking about it. And Zeke Carrell is actually rated by Lindy's as the 8th best center in the country, right? He's a returning starter. He's a 5th-year senior. He actually could come back for a 6th year if he wanted to. He's going to be the anchor of this offensive line, and I think he has an opportunity to make some All-America lists when it's all said and done. And so if you're going to have All-America next to your name, whether it's first, second, or third team, you belong in the top 10 list. And so that's why Zeke Carrell made my list. I think he has the opportunity to be top 5 at the end of the season, if not a little bit higher. And if he's top 3, that's All-America level. So That's why I've got him on my list.
No, I mean, that's completely fair. And he is a name that came into my head, but I'll just say he didn't make my top 15.
I didn't think he would. Yeah.
That I wrote down. And
I get it.
Because I just felt like, again, like even going 15 deep, there's some names, people have, thrown out some names and stuff so far. There's a name or two that's already been thrown out that also didn't end up in my top 10. So
right.
You're right. Zeke Correll is really good. I think probably just because of the position that he plays, maybe that's why, I overlook him or whatever. But
sure. Yeah,
I think he's got a really good, he's one of the 3 returning starters, and he's the anchor of the line. And, you can argue that he is, maybe completely underrated, especially since I didn't have him in my top 15.
Which, again, I figured that would probably be the case, and he's fresh in my mind because of the topic from this afternoon. But at the same time, and I think a lot of people give him they mark him down for his 2021 season when they had him at guard. When he's playing out of position, didn't play well. I mean, let's be honest. Didn't play well in 2021 at all. Beginning of the season in 2022, didn't play great. But I would say the latter 3 quarters of the season, he played really, really well. And really escalated his play and his leadership and all of that. So that's why he made my list for sure.
Yep. So my number 10, and this was, there was a lot of like on my part, like, what am I going to do here? I've got Jadarian Price at number 10.
Not on my list at all.
And I, again, like you said, you didn't think I'd have Correll. I didn't think you'd probably have Price.
Nice.
Here's how I justify having Jadarian Price on there, because like, I think one thing that, was kind of in my head, and I know that there are probably going to be some guys that some people are going to say need to be on this list. I do think it's important to specify that, maybe not specify, but to me anyway, like there is a difference between being a great athlete or being, like a big recruit and being a player that's going to be counted, at least going into the season right now, not just be counted on, but a great player. Like, in other words, do you at least know the assignments, like all those different kind of things. With Jadarian Price, the way I kind of justify putting him on the list is, I guess, a little bit more than a year ago, before the injury coming out of, spring, 2 running backs ended up combining for 1,760 yards last year for Notre Dame, Audric Estime and Logan Diggs. Jadarian Price was going to be in front of both of them, if not for the injury.
Sure.
And we're told that he's 100% and he's on track and everything else right now. So I've got to put Jadarian Price on this list because of what we knew about him a year ago. The fact now, Audric, Diggs is obviously gone now. Estime has shown what he can do, so like, that year of experience meant a lot to Audric Estime. So, where exactly Jadarian Price is, that's going to be, kind of the big question, and hopefully one that we get answered in training camp. But I had to include him on this list again, because those 2 guys combined for almost 1,800 yards, and Price would have been above both of them on the depth chart last year if he was healthy.
No, I like that one a lot. And there's going to be a battle for that number 2 spot. And whoever that's going to be is probably going to raise on the rankings, right? If we did this mid-season, say, or at the end of the season or whatever, whoever gets that number 2 slot is going to be very, very important to this team. No doubt about it. There's just no such thing anymore as a one-trick pony, one running back situation. That's just not how football is in 2023. They need that number 2 guy. Who's it going to be? Probably Price, if is actually 100% healthy. And what does that look like? That's going to be fun.
Right. So who's your number 9, Vince?
My number 9, controversial from the day he stepped foot on campus, but he continues to load up the stat sheet, and he will continue to be the starter at Mike linebacker until he walks off of campus, whenever that may be. And it's J.D. Bertrand. He deserves to be on this list. And I know people are going to have a hard time with that, but he's a really good football player.
Tommy had him on his list.
What's that?
Tommy had him on his list.
So. Yeah, no, he did. And I didn't want to put him towards the top, although I could very easily make a case for him being ranked higher than number 9, but he needed to be on the list. I mean, he's too important to the defense, being in the middle, being the guy. So he's number 9.
I've actually got him a little bit higher. He is number 7 on my list.
Go.
Look, he's led the team in tackles the last 3 years. No matter what you want to say about him, he is still making tackles, 183 tackles the last 2 years. So JD Bertrand definitely needs to be on the biggest question with him now, as with everybody really on the defense and the linebacker core specifically, biggest question is how much does a year in this system playing for Al Golden?
Sure.
Does that essentially in effect make him, like a step quicker now this year? Does it take less time to process, removing some of the thought from it and all that? I think that's going to be out there for all of them. I think that it will, because he's a smart guy. And again, he's led the team in tackles the last 2 years. So
he has to be on the list.
I've got him 2 spots higher, but he definitely needs to be on the list. My number 9 is Tobias Merriweather.
Okay.
Got a feeling, is he on your list?
Oh, he's number 5 on my list.
Okay. So he's a lot higher for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at Tobias Merriweather, and I'm looking at kind of a leap like Equanimous St. Brown made from what was that, 2015 to 2016, when he went from 1 catch for 8 yards in 2015 to 58 for 961 in the next. I'm looking for it's a pretty big leap to go from 1 catch, but again, Equanimous St. Brown did it just a few years ago, and I think that we know the kind of talent, and again, like when you look at, if not for the concussion, we would have got to, it would have been more than 1 catch, most likely. He would have been out there a lot more last year. So I think we're all looking forward to seeing where that Equanimous, that Sam Hartman especially to Equanimous St. Brown connection can go this season.
Yeah, and remember we were both disappointed that he wasn't on the same team as Sam Hartman in the spring game, because we wanted to see what that was going to look like, and instead we got the Great House Hartman show. But we were all looking forward. I am still right now looking forward to what that's going to look like, number 10 to number 5, over and over again, deep balls, over all of it, just all of it. So that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I'm expecting big things, like you said, from Tobias. He would have had much more effective year if it wasn't for the injury last year. I mean, that's just. He was just starting to come on. He was just starting to get more reps. He was just starting to get on the field more. And then he gets the concussion, and we never saw him again, basically, the rest of the year. So as long as he can stay healthy, then it's going to be awesome.
Michael says he could see 2 wide receivers, at least 2 receivers, making All-American with Hartman. That would be a big leap.
I would be shocked if even one got All-American honors, if I'm being honest. There's just
because of the way
too much offense out there.
Yeah, the way people, and
there's too much offense out in the country. And I'm not saying that they wouldn't be talented enough to do that. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm talking, I guess, more the politics of how All-Americans are chosen.
Yeah.
It's stat driven, and there's going to be plenty of other guys out there in the country that are going to have better stats.
Like, I don't think Will Fuller ever got recognized by the Biletnikoff Award. You know, like even like a semi-finalist, none of that stuff. And it's like, are you kidding me? The seasons that Will Fuller put together in back-to-back years. So
that's going to be a tall order, especially considering not one of these guys on the roster has any buzz going into the season either. They just don't. And if you don't have buzz going into the season, the chances of you being an All-American go way down. They just do. And you're going to have to get through a couple of Ohio State guys before you get to Notre Dame guys as well. I mean, there's just so much talent out there, and there's going to be so many stat stuffers out there that Notre Dame guys are going to get left in the dust, because Notre Dame is going to be more balanced. They just are. There's going to be a lot of rushing yards on this team as well. So that's going to be a tough ask, even for one All-American, in my opinion.
All right, so we've gone through 2 spots so far. We have not matched on either one of them.
Nope.
Yet.
So number 8 for me is where we're at, right?
Yep.
So number 8, I have the other tackle. I have Blake Fisher at number 8. He is poised to take a big step forward this season. Obviously, he was his first full year as a starter last year was inconsistent, to be expected as a redshirt freshman. But he gets to take his redshirt sophomore year this year. He's got a whole year under his belt. Was healthy the whole year. That's huge. He missed. Remember, he played a game and a half his first season as a freshman, and then missed the entire season until bowl prep of practice. That's a lot of football to miss, right? Yep. And then he started the entire year last year. So I think he's going to take a massive step forward this year.
I do too.
They have the opportunity of being the best tackle tandem in the country if Blake Fisher takes the step that I think he's going to take. So clearly he makes the list. He may even be too low, but I've got him at 8.
Yeah, I've got him 2 spots higher. Once again, I had Bertrand 2 spots higher than what you had, Bertrand. I've got Fisher 2 spots higher at number 6.
Okay.
So definitely was on my list, but I've got him just a little bit higher, and I agree with everything you said. I think he's going to be a mauler this year, and he's going to give Notre Dame a chance to have 2 offensive linemen go in the first round since McGlinchey and Quentin Nelson a few years back. So pretty exciting.
Agreed.
Okay, so my number 8 is Chris Tyree. And this is, in my opinion, the most underutilized player, especially last year. But really, I think you could make a case, when Kyron Williams was here, it was hard to make a case to use him more, other than as a receiver. But obviously, we're going to see him as a receiver more now. 56 catches for 461 yards in 3 seasons as a running back. And now he's going to be out there as one of Notre Dame's slot receivers, and maybe, some action out of the backfield still as well. And speed to burn and just everything else. The biggest challenge that I think Jared Parker has is just how to get the ball in his hands, probably like 8 to 10 times per game. I think that's do you think that that's a reasonable goal? 8 to 10
absolutely.
Times for Chris
They
Tyree?
have to. That has to be the floor. You know what I mean? Yeah. They have to almost force him the ball. He has to touch the football, whether it's the kick return game, whether it's the passing game, whether it's the running game. You've got to get the ball in his hands. He's a difference maker. I mean, there's no doubt about it. He's a difference maker.
Yep. Absolutely. And Tommy said he forgot about Tyree. So we put Tyree up there. Let me see. He's got him in there anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know where he's going to slot him. I don't know who he takes out. I don't know who he takes out of that order.
DJ's list: Meriwether, Hartman, Estime, Morrison, Tyree, Bertrand, Jaden Thomas, Joe Alt, Blake Fisher, and Harper.
Interesting.
1 through 10. All right. So that puts us at number 7.
Okay.
This is where I have JD Bertrand. Yep. Who do you have?
I have Xavier Watts, safety extraordinaire. I think he's getting overlooked a little bit, to be honest with you. He is the one guy we know is starting at safety. We know he's a playmaker. We know he's dynamic if he gets the ball in his hands. I think he's going to end up being, and for once, he's in the same position for more than 1 year, which is huge. And so I think he's going to have a tremendous season this year. I think he could end up being one of the leaders in that defensive backfield. I'm not saying he's going to be the best player in the defensive backfield. I'm saying one of the leaders of the defensive backfield. There's a difference. But if he takes the step that I think he's going to take, he's going to help solidify what that defensive backfield could be on what could be a really good defense, right? So safety is the big question mark on this team. But in my opinion, it's half. It's not both safety positions. It's half. Xavier Watts belongs on this list.
He's one that I went back and forth really hard on, but ultimately, because I included Jadarian Price, Xavier Watts did not make my top 10.
Gotcha.
He's someone, again, I gave lot of thought to, but like when I look at who I have on my top 10, like somebody had to get squeezed. They're good, there's some good players that ended up not making my top 10. So
right.
I agree with everything you said in terms of his importance. He just didn't quite make it for me, though. Because, like I said, I included Jadarian Price. You did not. By the way, did you have Tyree on your list? I don't. So you didn't have Tyree.
He made honorable mention for me. He was one of those guys that was kind of on the outside looking in. So
okay. All right. So I've got Price and Tyree on my list. You do not. You've got Zeke Correll and Xavier Watts on your list. I do not. So we've got some key differences.
Yes, we do. I like it.
Yeah. Okay. So that takes us to number 6, where I have Blake Fisher. You had Fisher at number 8. Who's your 6?
My number 6 is a guy that I've always been super high on, and that's Cam Hart. So I'm staying in the secondary. I've got Cam Hart, and I know there's a lot of people out there that for some reason forgot Cam Hart's a really, really good player. Part of that was because of injury, possibly, and part of it was because teams weren't throwing at Cam Hart. They threw at Benjamin Morrison. Now, that backfired on a lot of teams, obviously. Yeah. And from what I heard, one of the reasons Cam Hart is coming back to Notre Dame this season is because of how good Benjamin Morrison played, because he's hoping that more balls get thrown his direction. And he's going to be able to.
He has a chance at some interceptions, maybe.
He's going to have a chance to build up some stats a little bit. So this is going to be a very, very good. This is going to be a very, very good corner combination, a corner duo. I mean, definitely one of the tops in the country, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. They already made some lists, some top 10 lists for secondary, believe it or not. And I think that's on the heels of how good the corners are.
Yeah, you've got Hart at number 6. I've got him one spot higher at number 5. So I completely agree. And
I didn't have to convince you. I love it.
No, not at all. Not at all. He's very high on my list. Like I said, I've got him one spot higher. 2 career interceptions so far. So I'll be really curious to see if that works out in terms of the, coming back, see if he can kind of rack up some stats and see what he can do. He's been through some shoulder injuries and stuff like that in his time so far. Hopefully he's able to stay healthy. And I mean, this has got a chance to be the best secondary that Notre Dame has. And I think I said before, like going back to like when Shane Walton and Vontez Duff were together, that's been 20 plus years since those two guys were together. I think it's got a chance to, in terms of corner combinations, be a really good one between Cam Hart and Benjamin Morrison. Okay, so
we've both given our 5.
Right. So we'll hold it. You just gave your 6, right?
Well, yeah, but I have Tobias Merriweather at 5.
Oh, okay, that's right.
And you have Cam Hart at 5. So we both given our 5, kind of like because the other guy said it first or whatever.
So we can just jump right up to number 4. Right. And I've got a feeling
our top 4 have to be in whatever order.
Be the same 4 guys.
They have
a question of what order they're in.
They have to be. If they're not the same 4, then we got a problem.
Then we need to do a different show.
We got a big problem. All right. My number 4 is Audric Estime.
Okay.
That's, I mean, come on. He's the number 1 back. He is a man-child. He's Jerome Bettis Jr. He's whatever moniker you want to give him. He's poised to have a breakout season. There's no doubt about it.
Yep.
I would be shocked if he's on the roster in 24. I think that's how good of a season he's going to have.
I'm very happy to say that every player that you've had so far that we do have on the list, I have higher than you on my list. So
that's true.
Just everyone can keep that in mind down the road. Like, I liked you better than Vince. Okay. So
it's true.
I've got Audric. Right. I've got Audric at number 3 on my list. And I mean,
except Merriweather. You had him at 9. I had him at 5.
That's true.
The only one, though.
Tobias is the only guy. Tobias is the only guy. That's right. And you had him obviously a lot higher at number 5 compared to my number 9. That's really our biggest difference on, with the exception of the guys that, we each didn't include. But
true.
Yeah. So, I mean, We fully expect Audric Estime to have another big year. We've said before, the only thing that's going to keep him from having just a monster stat type season is the fact that there are 4 other really talented running backs in that room as well, whether it's Jadarian Price or, Jabron Payne, was able to show himself a little bit.
The kid from Penn State.
From Penn State. Yeah, that's right. That's right. You got Jeremiah Love, the freshman, coming in. So there's a lot of talent in that room. And, again, like that's the only thing that's going to keep him, I think, from having just a really monster season. I think he can still have 1,000 yards. He had 920 last year split in time, but I think the only thing that's going to keep him from having, like a 13, 14, 1,500 yard type season is the fact that there are going to be other guys in that room who are going to get some carries as well.
Somebody on the show earlier today in the mailbag asked over under 1,200 yards for Audric Estime this year on the ground.
I still think it's under because of what I just said.
That's what I said too. Yeah.
And you also have to factor in, like you keep saying, like, well, what's, the passing yards, they might not have a lot because they're going to rush for, it's like, what's the balance of that going to be? That's what I really want to look like. Cause I've said before, you can do both. Like Sam Hartman can still have like a 3,500 yard season and they can still rush for close to 200 yards per game, not necessarily but like at least 180, 190.
My bold prediction for the offensive line was that they were going to average 210 yards a game. Now, Brian pushed back on that and said he was going to say 5.5 yards a carry as opposed to whatever number you want to have as a game, just because of the new rule changes, which makes sense. I get that. We don't know how the new rule changes are going to affect some of these numbers, right?
Right.
And so I don't have a problem with that. Like 5.5 yards a carry, awesome. Like I would take that. Obviously, I think it's gonna vary game to game, Sean, as far as whether it's going to be a dominant running game or a dominant passing game, because there's going to be so many RPOs that it's going to be, what is the defense giving them? Are they giving them Audric Estime between the tackles all the game long? Or are they packing the box and forcing Sam Hartman to throw over the top? Like, what's the defense forcing you to do? I think this team offensively is going to be good enough to do whatever they need to do to take advantage. And so it could vary game to game depending on what that strategy is.
Yeah. And I'll be really curious, like with the rules changes that, we've talked about them, before. We haven't talked about them as much lately, but the stuff that I read at the time they were making the changes is they're really only expecting it to eliminate like between, like 10 to 15 plays per game, something like that. But, I would think that the biggest effect is going to be later in the game, like when you're just killing clock and you don't have to worry about, but we'll see. Yeah. That's something that we can we'll kind of have to write off the Navy game a little bit because that one's going to go quicker anyway. But, we'll kind of have to, we'll keep an eye on that and see sort of what it looks like. But the yards per carry, I do agree with, like, I think that even if, like that, like you were saying, like 210 yards per game isn't there, the yards per carry, I think, is going to be up because of the fact that defenses are going to have to respect the passing game in a way that they haven't had to for a long time. I think that's going to help the yards per carry at a very, at the least. Yeah.
And you kind of brought it up. I think one of the points that I made about the numbers being higher on the ground next year are the fact that, they're going to be running out the clock when they've got a big lead. And I think there's going to be some opportunity there for some of these younger guys to break some runs and to do some things on the ground, because they're not even going to be throwing the ball because they're going to be up by 3-4 touchdowns. And so I think that's going to not artificially raise the run, but like that's going to be the case. You know what I mean? So
Crystal has become the first to start the free the freshman.
Oh boy,
wide receiver.
Wow.
every year, I mean, there's one freshman wide receiver, right? So it was Tobias last year. Crystal has jumped on early, freeing the freshman. Okay, so Audric is your number 4. He's my number 3. My number 4 is Benjamin Morrison, who I've
4. Wow. Okay.
Well, I mean,
there's only 2 guys that got All-American last year, right?
Well,
I got him 1, 2.
Benjamin Morrison was a freshman All-American, right? I don't think he made
still got AA to his name.
I thought it was just freshman.
I think it was too, but either way.
But still, I mean, we're talking about, it's no secret who we've got left on this list. We've got a guy who's going to be a first-round draft pick and a quarterback who's got more touchdown passes than, anyone in college football entering this season, and has a chance to end up, at the top of the all-time, passing list. So we're splitting hairs. Those other 2 guys are 100% splitting hairs. They're a little bit more experienced than Benjamin Morrison. That's why I put him at number, and again, like Estime, like you have him at number 4. I've got him at number 3. And again, he might not get the monster numbers, but he is still a very vital, very important member of this offense. And he is a very, he's draft eligible after this season as well. I'll be curious to see where he ends up going after this season. So that's why I've got Audric slightly ahead of Benjamin Morrison and his 6 interceptions from a season ago. Morrison is my 4. Audric is my 3.
Obviously, I have Morrison higher. I have him at number 2.
Okay.
So I have Ben Morrison number 2 for all the reasons you just said. He's going to get all the pub going into the season as the top corner on the team, although I do think Cam Hart's going to have something to say about that. But he's going to be really, really good. Cam Hart's going to be really, really good. They're both part of a secondary that has the potential of being really, really good. So like you said, we are splitting hairs here a little bit, but I do have Ben Morrison at 2.
Okay. So that leaves you with 2 guys. You've got your 3 and you've got your 1. I've got my 2 and I've got my 1. They're going to be the same 2 guys.
Of course.
Do you want to just throw it out? I would guess your number 3 is going to be Alt. Is that who it is?
It is not. So
you're going straight up on All-American honors.
Yep.
Then.
And I'm going with the fact that Joe Alt's going to get drafted higher. He's going to have more honors, all of it. Yes, he's number 1.
So you've got Alt at number 1.
Yes.
And you've got Morrison at number 2, and that means you've got Hartman at number 3.
Number 3.
Okay. Hartman is my number 1, and Alt is my number 2. And I guess, again, as you said, Joe Alt is going to be a first-round draft pick. I've said Joe Alt is going to be a first-round draft pick. We all know that. But in terms of importance, he was going to be a first-round draft pick regardless of who's the quarterback on this team. And what's going to propel this offense to, even be within spitting distance of 40 points a game? Like I saw someone, ask here. I mean, and that's why, again, like Sam Hartman ultimately might not end up getting drafted at all. I think he will. I think if he and Book can get drafted in the 4th round, I think Sam Hartman's going to end up being drafted somewhere in that middle as well, if not even higher, depending on the kind of season.
If he has a good season, he'll be higher.
You can obviously argue that he's the most important player on the offense this season.
Now,
is he the best? Is
so
it
best? So here's the deal. We didn't put any parameters to this list, right?
Exactly.
And so if the list was most important to Notre Dame, there's no question Sam Hartman's number 1. It was top 10 players on the roster. So I went who are the top players on the roster? That's why I have those guys ahead of Sam Hartman.
We left it open.
Yes.
Didn't put parameters
which is what makes it fun, right? I mean, that's what makes this whole thing fun in the first place. We can have this argument. Sam Hartman is by far the most important player to this team going into the 23 season because we've talked about it ad nauseum that Notre Dame's been a quarterback away forever, right? They've had bit parts and pieces all over the place, but they've been a quarterback away. Sam Hartman is that quarterback. At least we think he is going into the season. He's by far the most important player on this team. So he would definitely be number 1 if that was the criteria that I was using. That's not the criteria I use, so I have him at 3. If that makes sense.
No, I understand what you're saying. I completely understand what you're saying. Obviously, I don't agree, but
which is great.
I understand.
I love that.
That's right. So here's Vince's Oh, yeah, go ahead.
No, you can go through. I say I want to hit our honorable mentions too. I've got some names I wrote down.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Brought up.
I mean, there are some notable guys that we left off this list. Let's do the honorable mentions first. You had Xavier Watts on, your top 10. I did not. I do have him among my honorable mentions. Riley Mills. I'm curious where you considered him.
I have him at 12. I have him on my honorable mention. I had him at 12.
I've got him kind of in that range, and it's just, I wish I would have seen more actual production from him last year. I think he's got a really good chance to be a top 10 type guy this season. But, we've really, for 2 years now, kind of been waiting on Riley Mills. He's been a consistent, solid performer, but he hasn't been that guy that has taken that big step so far. I'll be curious to see, though, playing exclusively inside, a little bit more bulk on his frame and all that kind of stuff, what that does for him. And having more guys who are able to rush the passer and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Who else is on your honorable mention then?
So in no particular order, my honorable mention was Riley Mills, Chris Tyree, Jordan Botelho, and Javonte Jean-Baptiste.
Okay. I had Botelho as well. And, really, again, like with that number 10 spot between Watts.
Yeah.
Botelho is still a little bit.
He's still an enigma to me.
It's got a lot of talent. Flashes. We really need to see it. Like, I would really like to see it 4 weeks in a row, like right off the bat. Navy's going to be a tough one
for sure
to gauge. But, like after that, like
he needs to be consistent on and off the field for a whole season before he cracks the top 10 for me. And that's the biggest deal. And I put Javonte on there because they need a consistent pass rush. And I think he could be that guy. But again, I don't know. And so I can't really say he's one of the 10 best players on the team because I just don't have enough information, enough empirical evidence to say that he's that guy, So he made my honorable mention, but he's not going to crack the top 10 just yet.
Yeah. And I had Jaden Thomas in my honorable mention.
I think that's fair. I think he could have a great season. He could be a matchup nightmare.
And I think he will. I think that trio of Tobias Merriweather and Chris Tyree and Jaden Thomas, and then, Crystal obviously wants the freshman in there. And a lot of people are going to be in that same boat. But
most of those people just watch the spring game and they're like,
and that's
Jaden Greathouse is the best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah, it's the good and bad of the spring game because now everyone has seen him had a monster game, but you got to remember that some of those other guys are in front of him.
Correct.
I think he's going to get some opportunities, but I don't know what it's going to look like in terms of overall playing time. Chris says, interesting question. Might a freshman player crack this top 10? I think that's the gist of what he's saying there. I mean,
not yet.
It's just too hard because, again, like we've seen Greathouse in a spring game.
Right.
Greathouse had the big spring game in part because Tobias Merriweather was playing for the other team.
Exactly.
We didn't get to see anything of what Tobias could do because Tobias was playing with Tyler Buckner and Greathouse got to play with Sam Hartman.
Right.
So, and it ditto with Jaden Thomas, he was starting off with a big game. I mean, Love could, but he's got a
lot of hill to climb to get on the field, let alone have enough production to be a top 10 player on the entire team.
And this is what I was starting off with. There's a difference between good player now and by good player, we mean at the very least contributor,
right?
Versus great athlete, great talent, but we don't have enough on him yet.
Could he be there eventually? Sure. Not this year. Unless God forbid Estime goes down with an injury for the season, and really probably another guy has to go down as well.
Mm-hmm.
Then maybe if he's the number one back. There's no way he's going to crack the top 10, like the 10 best. Like, I don't know that he makes the 10 best offensive players that I would have on my list.
Right. As of right now,
July 11th.
Yeah. Like as of right now, his best opportunity is probably, as a special teams.
Sure.
Player.
But that doesn't make you a top 10
camp
player on the team.
Exactly.
Like, that's a big
because
difference.
Again, like I've got DeDario Price and Audric Estime on my list. Right. Not to mention Chris Tyree. So are you going to put Jeremiah Love, as great a talent as he is, ahead of any of those three guys right now? I just don't think you can yet.
No.
Those guys are all proven. They've shown what they can do. But, again, like, well,
Price was
still haven't seen
all year.
Yeah, again, we saw Price last spring, and
he was the number one back.
Maybe you jumped in late, Chris. I don't, but I said off the top when I put DeDario Price on my list a year ago, just a little bit more, coming out of spring last year, he was going to be ahead of both Logan Diggs and Audric Estime, and those guys combined for almost 1,800 yards last year. And so now DeDario Price is healthy. So knowing what we knew about him last year, I've got to put him at, on my list because, Jeremiah Love has only stepped foot on campus this summer. We haven't got to see him do anything. Again, it's one thing to be a highly regarded. Okay, Chris is going to get into that whole thing. We haven't seen him yet. So until we see him, we can't say that he's top 10. That's just where we're going to have to leave that.
And I don't think our list has a whole lot to do with potential, to be honest with you. Our list is proven talent. At least my list is proven talent as I'm looking at these names.
It's kind of what we said off the top. This is not based on
Right.
So Vince, are you ready for rapid fire?
I'm always ready for rapid fire, baby. Let's do this.
Got a couple extras that have come through the chat so far already that I'll throw in here as they come up. Fill in the blank on this first one, though. It's blank that on 3 has dropped Notre Dame commit CJ Carr from number 10 to number 14 quarterback in the 2024 class.
Comedy, pure comedy that he continues to fall down these rankings. That you're telling me that there's 13 better quarterbacks in this class than CJ Carr. That's a joke. That is a hilarious joke. And at the end of the day, it means absolutely nothing. But he will prove this idiot, whoever put this list together, completely wrong. That's what's going to happen.
It's like from a Notre Dame perspective, what difference does it make right now?
Right.
I get it. Like you've got reason as a Notre Dame fan to be ticked off that your guy is dropped in this ranking for whatever reason, even though he went to the Elite 11 and performed like everyone who went to the Elite 11. Not everyone, but the general consensus is he was a top 5 quarterback at the Elite 11. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to tell me he's the number 14 quarterback in the country.
Hilarious.
But to your point, what difference does it make at this point? He's been a firm commitment. He's been locked in the whole time. He is coming here. He's, one of the highest rated quarterbacks that, we've seen coming in the door as a true freshman in a long time. He's going to be here. He's going to play. So what difference does it make? What some yuckity yuck thinks about CJ Carr? He's your guy. He's going to be here. And I think we've all got a lot of confidence that once he gets here, he's going to perform at a top level. But Chris, I would not put him top 10 going into next year because we haven't seen him yet.
Neither would I.
Like to see him first. CBS Sports says Irish running back Audric Estime is primed for a breakout year this season. Do you buy or sell that?
Oh, I absolutely buy that because last year he was like the closer, right? To use a baseball term. He was the closer, and he would come in when defenses were, in the second half and just punish them for being alive. And he's going to do that all game now. And I think that he is absolutely primed for a breakout year. I don't know that he's going to have like the stat line that says, all time, whatever. But his impact on the game for Notre Dame is going to be breakout year. He's going to be the unquestioned number 1 back as long as he stays healthy the entire time. He's going to run guys over. He's going to run away from guys. He's going to make guys look stupid. It's going to be fun to watch. I fully anticipate him being in the draft at the next April fully anticipate that being the case.
This was a little bit of a not trick question, but I wanted to see like if you were thinking the same as me. You are not. Like I understand your rationale. Like I consider Audric Estime broken out though. Like 920 yards last year in his first season as a running back. I consider him broken out already. So that's kind of, again, I wanted to see sort of how if you and I interpreted this the same. You obviously look at it and again, I get your point. Like he was more the closer, the bulldozer, the battering ram at the end of games and all that kind of stuff. And, business was a booming, I guess. He did pretty well in that role as he ended up with 920 yards. But I think when you run for over 900, I think he's already broken out. Now, maybe if you're talking about like, is he going to become, more like a household national name, that kind of thing, okay, maybe to that extent he hasn't broken out. But
sure,
I think he's broken already, and now he's just looking to continue it. And like you, I think he's going to be a guy who's in the draft, getting ready for training camp a year from now.
You set me up, and I missed the alley-oop.
Hey, that's all right. Again, we all have different interpretations.
I see where you're coming from, though. I mean, when you rush for almost 1,000 yards, have you broken out already? Like,
right.
I get that. Right. I guess I would look at it, and you brought it up.
I honestly phrased the question the way it was so that I didn't lead you in that direction. I wanted to see
that's good.
What we would each think of this.
I think he will become more of a household name moving forward. He's a household name with Notre Dame fans. I don't think he's a household name with non-Notre Dame fans. And I think that this is going to be a year. They have some marquee games on the schedule where that could potentially be the case. You know,
like, is he a guy that like game day and big noon kickoff are talking about the week after, like going into Ohio State and coming out of Ohio
Him
State.
being like a key to the game,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Yep.
Does he become that kind of guy? I could see that as a different kind of breakout. Yeah, Chris says going back to CJ Carr might end up being the day one starter, him or Minchie, but love Angeli. And I mean, he could be day one starter.
He could be.
24 the offseason.
24 quarterback situation is about as wide open as it gets, in my personal opinion. And you got to add whatever quarterback they get in the transfer portal too. Like who knows who's going to be the starter? I have no idea. Nobody does.
On the subject of Audric Estime, Chi-Town asks, would we rather see Estime rush for 1,500 yards or Hartman throw for 4,000?
That's easy. It's Hartman throw for 4,000 because that means he also threw a boatload of touchdowns, and which means Notre Dame scored a boatload of points, which means they won a boatload of games. So it's Hartman for me, hands down.
Yeah, because I still think for Estime to get I think if Estime gets 50, and again, this is not taking anything away from Audric Estime, but I think if he gets that big a number, it's probably because at least one, if not two other running backs are limited or hobbled to some extent, and he has to carry the bulk of the load a little bit more. That's just kind of how I look at it. And I agree. Like if Hartman's throwing for 4,000, they're lighting up the scoreboard. They're playing video.
It's gonna be like a pinball machine. You know what I mean? It's gonna be a lot of fun to watch.
Yep. And then Leopard Iron says, any updates on when they're going to announce the new apparel deal? From what we've heard, sometime before the end of this month. So there's no firm date on it, but we've just heard supposed to be, before the end of this month. So
it is
anytime. My sources say it could happen as soon as tomorrow.
Really?
No. Now, see, that's again. I was just playing with you there. But
John,
to me, when I hear somebody say it could happen as soon as tomorrow. I could also win the lottery as soon as tomorrow.
Right. Means nothing.
That's right. Anything could happen as soon as tomorrow, but when will it actually? So I didn't mean to play with you.
Oh, see, you started something. So
yes.
No, here. So I gotta say, and this has nothing to do with Leopard's question or anything like that, but I will say that this particular topic about the apparel deal has grown so old for me. I don't give a crap who they choose at this point because it doesn't affect me in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
I don't care. It does not matter to me.
And you know what? No matter what gets picked, just look at the chat right now. Please no Under Armour, please no Nike or Jumpman. It's like, it's not going to be universal. It's just like tuning in the TV and seeing the announcers. It's like not everyone's going to be unanimous on whatever they pick. The most whoever they end up with, it's going to be sort of the fine print in the details in this agreement that I'm going to be most curious about. Things like, and we might not even find out, like to what extent NIL might be involved in this, or will there be flexibility for, like, will it be mostly an apparel deal, but will there be flexibility in terms of what shoes the players are allowed to wear, different brands and that kind of thing.
This is the most overrated comment, and it's nothing against you, Chris, but I've heard this multiple times. Kids don't choose schools for who their apparel dealer is. That's not a thing, man. Like, I'm sorry. That's not
literally. Have you read any of the recruiting stories, that we have on the site? Have you ever seen, like Under Armour or not, like, if you, like, none of that doesn't come up when they ask.
Nobody's like, I picked Notre Dame because of Under Armour. I picked Alabama because of Nike. Like, that's not a thing. It's just not. I'm sorry. It's not a thing. So Crystal's talking about polls and people wanting Nike. That has nothing to do with recruiting. Zero.
Right.
So, and then there's nothing you can do to convince me otherwise, unless a bunch of 5-star recruits starts telling people, well, I picked this school because of their apparel deal, which isn't happening. They're not picking one school over the other because of who provides their free shorts.
And that's what I was getting ready to say. No matter what the brand is, the players get everything for free. They don't have to pay for any of it.
Right. So, they don't care.
They really don't care that much.
And I do understand the shoe situation. I get that. I get that. But people aren't turning down playing for the women's basketball program at Notre Dame because they're an Under Armour school. And unless you've heard otherwise, Sean, you're a lot closer to the women's program than I am. But if Niele Ivey is offering scholarships to the top players in the country, they're not like, you got Under Armour, I'm going elsewhere.
Right.
I don't think that's happened. I realize there's an issue with the shoes, and I'm not debating that, but they're not picking where they go to school because of it.
To my knowledge, that has not happened. Like, if you watched any games last year, you might have noticed there were a couple of players who were wearing shoes that weren't Under Armour by the end of the season.
Look at
I won't
you.
say who.
Well,
all you got to do is go back and look at a couple games at the end of the season. It was out there and it was pretty obvious, especially from where I sat. But when I asked them about it, they said the shoes are horrible. They don't make their feet feel good. That's exactly, that was, that's why. And so they wore shoes that made their feet feel better, and I just,
it is what it is.
Guns and buns. I mean, Carnell Tate made a comment that OSU
was looking for a bag of money
with Nike had to say, like,
because he was looking to get paid.
Yeah. And, like, to that, I mean, just look at the whole scandal from a couple of years ago, in college basketball. That whole thing stemmed from Adidas and Nike and, paying players to go to certain schools. And so now that NIL is a thing, it wasn't back then, but now that NIL is a thing, of course the shoe companies are, they're going to pump even more money into it now. So, like, to that extent, yes, but because they can hide that under the guise of NIL now. And we all know that's out there, and that's obviously a factor in recruiting. So it's not as much the shoes, it is the NIL, regardless of, of whatever, and, whatever team it is and what brand, but the fact that schools can hide that money behind the NIL, All
right. I want to bring this one up from Irish Chi-Town. Irish Chi-Town always brings up good points. So I want to bring this up. He says, Vince, UNC put out an article a few years back that having Jumpman help them with recruiting, and they probably meant the shoes. That's great, but they're not exactly a neutral party when it comes to putting out that article. Notre Dame put out an article that said, Under Armour helps us with recruits. Like, that doesn't, no, and
it's being a partner with Jumpman,
right?
Promoting the brand that you've got, on your athletes. Like, you can say that, but what is it? It's basically it's just PR for the shoe company, for the apparel company.
UNC probably has better traction with recruits when they say that Michael Jordan went here as opposed to his silhouette is on the gear.
Right.
I mean,
so yeah. Let me put it this way. Is it a factor? Sure. Because everything is a factor.
It's very low.
Is it the factor? No.
Like it's very low.
Whatever factors, I think, start up here, and then shoes probably falls at the bottom of the list. I think it would probably end up being, somewhere around 8 to 10 for most players. Like if they made a list of whatever their factors are in what school and what program that they're going to end up with. So is it a factor? Yes. I just don't think it is anywhere close to being the factor for anybody, unless the NIL comes into play, and then you're talking about money changing hands.
Right. Crystal says, he's quoting me, he was looking to get paid. 17-year-old players look at apparel. What 17-year-old do you know that has to go to New Balance to get clothes? A hell of a lot, actually. And I don't know when the last time you went and walked through a high school, but I would say a very large percentage of kids are walking around with New Balance shoes. So that's just a bad example, in my opinion. That New Balance is a shoe that these kids wear. And I'm not saying that New Balance needs to be sponsoring football teams anytime soon. But if you're going to bring up New Balance, that is a very popular brand with 17-year-olds right now. So just throw that out there.
Mr. 2.0 seconds your emotion.
There you go.
All right. So now we can get off the very divisive apparel. And, just to go back, supposed to happen sometime this month. We don't have any more information.
And you know what? I can't wait for them to announce it.
When I said what I said earlier.
I can't wait for them to announce it so we don't have to talk about it anymore, to be honest with you.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, again, I'd just like to see kind of what the finer print, the biggest thing for me, I think, is regardless of the brand, especially if it ends up being Under Armour, will there be any flexibility in what shoes the players can wear?
Right.
Can they choose their own?
I mean, obviously, the women's basketball team wore their own, so there must be some flexibility in there somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which would be harder to stomach, Vince? Brian Kelly winning a national championship at LSU, or Tommy Rees helping Alabama win a national championship?
Oh, that might be the easiest question you've ever asked me. It's the harder thing to stomach would be Brian Kelly winning a national championship. There's no doubt about it. If Alabama wins a national championship, it's because, Tommy Rees obviously played a big role in it, but he's part of the machine, man. He's a cog in the machine, and they won just because of who they are. This is absolutely, it would make me sick to my stomach to watch Brian Kelly hoist up the national championship trophy. I would be visibly ill.
I agree. And, Nick Saban has won national championships with multiple offensive coordinators. Like Tommy Rees would not be the guy, he would not be the reason Alabama ends up winning a national championship. If Brian Kelly goes down there to LSU and wins one, I think that's going to make a lot of Notre Dame fans sick. But, again, it's like, hate Brian Kelly if you want. And none of us are by any stretch of the imagination, the biggest Brian Kelly fans right now, especially with the way that he left. But, I said when he took the job, if freaking Les Miles and Ed Orgeron can go to LSU and win national championships, Brian Kelly had to be sitting there going, come on, are you kidding me? And so, he made his little deal with the devil and he headed down south. But that would be my answer as well. For sure.
It would be horrible. It would be horrible. I would have that image just burned into my brain, and it would haunt my nightmares. It would be horrible.
All right. So the Kansas City Chiefs are the favorites in Vegas to repeat as Super Bowl champions, and Georgia is the favorite to win another college football national championship as of right now. Would you bet on either of those two to win it all this season, or would you take the field against them?
I would take the field in both cases. I would feel better about taking the field in the NFL than in college football, to be honest with you, even though there's more teams and the field, makes my odds better on the college football side, but I would take the field in both. I think there's too much parity. Well, there's too much parity in the NFL. There's just enough parity where I wouldn't take Georgia in college football. Just enough. Because there's still tiers, and all of that in college football. Not anybody can win the national championship.
I got to go field as well. It has been almost 20 years since an NFL team repeated as Super Bowl champion. And that was New England in 04 and 05. Like, that's how long it's been. And, Kansas City they're obviously the closest thing to a sure bet that you can get when you look at the fact that they've won a couple of Super Bowls, in the last four seasons now, and they've been to another one as well. They're the closest thing to New England that we've had basically since Tom Brady left the Patriots. So I would still bet against them because there's still just as good of odds, I think. Like, on average, there's one team that goes from worst to first in its division in the NFL. Look at the Bengals a couple of years ago and what they did. They came out of nowhere. They obviously didn't win a Super Bowl, but they got to the Super Bowl. Georgia's a little bit different because they, yeah. And, when you look, like Nick Saban, that he's good, but he's got the quarterback. Really, both of those teams there are a lot of quarterback questions when you sit back and look at it across the SEC this year. So it's going to be really interesting to see where they end up. And obviously we know that Alabama has a quarterback, question, with Tyler Buckner and Tommy Rees, combine the two down there. So I would take the field against both of them though, as well.
Yep.
Especially, when you've got Alabama lurking and everything else.
You got Notre Dame lurking. Okay.
There you go. On the come.
That's right.
So David Ross, I meant to ask you this yesterday, and I forgot.
I saw this.
He got ejected in the first inning of the Cubs game against the Yankees Sunday. It was their last game, of course, before the All-Star break. And here's what I'm going to clean this up a little bit. Here's what he said. Here's what he said to home plate umpire Alex McKay, and they caught it on microphones. You've got to be better. You got one bleeping game before the break, and you're that effing bad already. So rate that rant, Vince, on a scale of 1 to 10.
I'd give it like a 7.5, 8. I would have liked it to be longer. I want more. I always want more. Like, he walked out. So he's chirping from the dugout. He gets ejected. Once he gets ejected, he walks out and he gets in the face of the umpire. He says like those 2 sentences, and then he walks back. Like, I guess there's the whole, like, the George Costanza, like, leave him wanting more kind of a thing, like a mic drop moment, because the announcers loved it. They're like, that's the best thing I've ever heard. Yeah, they were all
Paul
over
O'Neill
it.
Was going crazy on the Yes Network.
Oh, it was hilarious. But I want more. Like, he was on a roll. Keep it coming, man. Keep it coming. So, and it was the first inning. It was the first batter of the first inning, I think. Like, it was early.
It hadn't even started. And that's what I didn't understand was Kyle Hendricks was warming up, and the umpire, like, I guess Hendricks threw like one too many warm-up pitches or something like that. So the umpire assessed him a pitch clock violation.
Oh, really?
The count was 1-0 to the batter, and that's got Ross worked up. And Ross got thrown, like I think you said, before he even got to home plate, so like he gets to home plate. And I thought that, like, for someone, especially who had gotten tossed already, this was pretty mild. So like, I'd still give it an 8, but I did think it was pretty golden,
Yeah.
You got one game before the break. You can't be this bad already,
Exactly. That was great.
Be good right now. And then you've got a 3-day break. Why are you this bad before the game has even started? That was pretty good.
It was a great comment. It was a great comment. I mean, he left us wanting more. There's no doubt about that. So, David Ross, you get the bell.
First bell.
David Ross gets the bell.
I love it.
David Ross gets the bell. And they won the series. They ended up winning 7-4. They win the series. And you got a little bit of good momentum going into the All-Star break if you're a Cubs fan. So,
yes,
love it.
All right, one more question for tonight. This is a question from a listener that we got, I think, in a mailbag maybe last week that we hadn't been able to get to yet. What coach is or was the best to listen to in a post-game press conference?
I had to really think about this one. And I had to go back in my head and remember sitting in the post-game press conferences and listening to the opposing coaches. And for those of you that don't know, this is how things went. So they had one post-game press conference room. They would bring in the opposing head coach first. Then they would bring in the Notre Dame head coach. And then they would bring in Notre Dame players. And if you wanted to talk to an opposing player, they were just kind of out in the tunnel area. So we all got to hear the opposing head coach, which I kind of liked, to be honest with you. I enjoyed that opportunity. They don't do that anymore. You have to pick which coach.
Separate rooms.
Right.
Yeah.
You got to pick which coach you want to hear talk.
Does the visiting coach even get a room, or do they just do like
That's a good
rooms?
question. I'm not even sure, because the new interview room, quote unquote new, is over on the visitors' side where the visitors used to be interviewed. So I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you. I'm sure he's got someplace where he can be interviewed. But I remember enjoying listening to Pete Carroll.
I would agree with that.
And Jim Harbaugh. I enjoyed listening to those. And I'm talking about when Jim Harbaugh was at Stanford. And obviously Pete Carroll was at USC. I enjoyed listening to those guys because you never really knew what they were going to say. And the one, and I know this isn't the question, but the one that I hated the most, Lloyd Carr.
I did not enjoy Lloyd Carr just because, like, as much as you hate Michigan, I just loathe Lloyd Carr back then. And I've,
me too.
He tried to, sort of like, he tried to play that game when the cameras were on him, but there's like the time where he's walking off the field that like he was just, treated a sideline reporter like total crap. I remember I can't remember which one it was. I don't want to say. I know it was a female. I don't want to say the name. It was just like got what I thought was a legitimate question and just did kind of the stare down and shook his head kind of thing. And it's like, like coach better if you don't want to be asked a question. So I couldn't stand Lloyd Carr. John L. Smith. Do you remember him, the Michigan State coach?
Oh, good call.
He was a goofball, man. And
yes, he was.
That was back in the Brady Quinn days. And I remember, like he was asked a question about Brady Quinn and he called him Quinn the Eskimo. And he would just always like have just some weird kind of quippy stuff, to say that,
you
didn't
never knew what was
going to make sense.
Come out of his mouth. Yeah, that's a good one. I forgot about him. That's a really good one.
Yeah. This is a interesting question. Is Coach Kelly a robot? He's not a robot because like, especially, after, as we've all seen before, after a loss, he got a little bit better because I think he got talked to,
reprimanded.
Yes. For throwing players under the bus. And so, some of the other
notorious for that.
He is much better on Monday after he's had a couple days, to think about some things that he's going to say. The emotion usually gets to Brian Kelly in the immediate aftermath of a game, just like, again, like think about it. He was asked after the Alabama game about closing the gap and that kind of thing. And, it was everybody else's fault, but his.
He's so good at
that they lost and there was no gap to close and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I would not call him a robot by any means. He lashed out quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Chris. That was after the Hurricane game.
Yeah.
I remember
Sam Mustafer for the snapping. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yep. Never got to cover. ND Cheat Sheet said Mike Leach famous for his interviews. We never got to cover Mike Leach, unfortunately.
So it's got to be somebody that came through Notre Dame Stadium, essentially, because didn't go on the road very often. And so
I agree with what you're saying, though. I like sometimes it really like you sat there and you waited, like the opposing coaches sometimes could take a while, and maybe that's ultimately why they ended up splitting them up. But I do miss, getting to hear some of those guys talk a little bit. Like men's basketball, they typically, they do that format still over at Notre Dame after the games, where like they bring in the visiting coach first, and then they used to bring in Mike Bray, obviously, when he was here. But yeah, so you'd get to hear from like Coach K or Roy Williams or Jim Boeheim, and those kind of guys. And it was never mind. I can't. Buzz Williams.
From Marquette.
Marquette and then Virginia Tech, and he's at Texas A&M now. When he was at Virginia Tech, I think it was one of the last times he came here, if not the last time, he told a story about how when he was still in college, he was trying to, he wanted to become a coach. And he said he wrote letters to every coach in America, asking, like for advice and, like, what do I, all this different stuff. He said Mike Bray was one of, if not the only guy who wrote back. He was one of like 2 or 3 maybe who wrote back. And so he said he always remembered him for that. And like, that's a story that, we don't get if the setup's not like that.
Right.
So
exactly.
Get a little bit different perspective. Here's some of that different kind of stuff. I thought that was kind of cool. So I would include Buzz Williams, even though he's not a football coach. I would include him on that list.
I like it.
Yeah. Bo Schembechler, none of us were around.
He's going to say, not that old.
I might look that old, but I'm not that old. So Vince was still trying to figure out if he was going to middle school dance back in the Bo Schembechler.
Yeah, when was he coach, man? Like that was.
I'm trying to remember, like, because he might have even been, because like Gary Moeller was definitely by the mid 90s. I can't remember. See if I can find here real quick when Bo Schembechler.
Looking it up.
Retired.
Come on. Here we go. He was at Michigan from 69 to 89.
There you go. Yeah. We definitely weren't around back then.
No.
I was Tim Priester about that.
I was 8 when he last coached a game at Michigan.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Chris is 50. He's not much. He's just a little bit younger than me and just a little bit older than you. So right in the middle of us. All right. Well, that's going to do it for today's show. We appreciate you joining us today. We've got more shows, of course, coming up over the course of this week as we get a little bit closer to the start of training camp, which not allowed to say when it starts, but hit the like button on your way out. And of course, subscribe, rate, and review. And we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.